Have you ever worked in a block of code for a long time, even as much as many years, and really wondered what was going on within it? That's sort of how I think about startSetup and endSetup functions within Magento 2 modules. Just recently I was wondering what's actually going on within those functions. Do we even need them? And really, what's the root cause of using them in the first place? Before I continue, remember to like and subscribe to this video so you can get updated when I post other material just like this. This video is brought to you by M.academy. Do you want to level up your Magento 2 skills? I created M.academy to teach others what I learned after programming for about 20 years. If you are new to Magento 2, check out the Magento 2 Coding Kickstart course, which really tells you everything you need to know to become a productive Magento 2 programmer. You can also check out the M.academy Library for some free mini courses and lessons about PHP, Docker, command line, and more. So I've always called startSetup and endSetup at the start of my Magento 2 modules in every single installer script that I've ever written. But why? Let's take a look at the code and figure out what's actually going on within those functions and see if we even really need to call them. Let's open up the recurring.php file within Magento Catalog's module setup directory. Let's command click into this function, and we can see that this is an instance of Magento Framework's setup interface. This is just an interface, so we need to find out the implementation of this interface. Let's open up a terminal window and grep for setup interface. We'll also search just within the vendor Magento Framework folder for this concrete class. Since this must be implemented, we'll prepend implements to our search. And we have a result. Let's copy and paste this file name and open it up in our IDE. In PHP Storm, we'll use Command-Shift-O to open the file directly. If you didn't know this and want to learn other keyboard shortcuts in PHP Storm, check out my mini course about obscure PHP Storm hacks. If we search for the startSetup function, we'll see it's calling startSetup from the connection. Let's command click into this function and we're directed into another interface, this time adapter interface. Let's again grep files that implement this interface. We'll see that there are a few files which implement the adapter interface. If we look through all the results, we'll want to look for what makes sense for what we're doing here. Since startSetup utilizes MySQL, we'll want to look at the adapter for this type. There are two classes, one with search functionality and one in DB. We know that startSetup uses the root DB adapter, so this is where we're going to want to look for the code. Let's copy and paste this file name and open it up. We'll again search for the startSetup function and notice that we're finally at the place where we want to find out what's going on. Let's digest this code a bit. First is the SQL mode. If we Google this, we can read up a bit more about what server SQL modes actually are. Understand that this line is just resetting the SQL mode though. The next two set lines are setting some user-defined variables. @ is used for a variable similar to the $sign in PHP. Both of these lines are setting the values to the current assignments. If we check out the endSetup function, this is setting values back to those defined variables that were created in startSetup. But first, let's look at the startSetup function. This is setting MySQL variables. First, foreign key checks are set to 0, completely disabling foreign key checks. I'm really not sure why this is a thing. Foreign key checks ensure consistency in our database, and just by turning them off, it could lead to corrupt databases over time. By disabling this, you are preventing errors from being thrown, similar to PHP's suppressing @ symbol. The next line, SQL mode equals no auto value on 0. If we look up MySQL's documentation, we can see this handles handling of auto increment columns. Turning on this mode makes only null generate the next sequence number. The documentation goes on to say that this is useful if 0 has ever been stored in a table's auto increment column. This also says it's not a recommended practice. After going through all of this, the question is, do we really need to even call these functions? And a better question is, if we do so, is it a good practice? After analyzing all of this, it's my determination that this is probably a bad practice. So what happens if we don't call these functions? Foreign key checks, when enabled, they won't allow you to insert bad data into the database. The IDs of multiple columns actually have to match each other for data to be inserted. This is really a good thing and prevents corruption to your database. Also, by allowing 0 value auto increment columns, it's really aiding in a practice that's not recommended. Overall, it's really just a better practice to let your setup scripts fail rather than dealing with inserting incorrect foreign key entries or database records. So is there ever a time you'd want to use these? If you're a module developer, you may have times where your setup scripts are failing for your customers because they have incorrupt entries in their database. While this is really a problem with their stores, you could be dealing with the after effects of them not being able to install a module because of their database. Honestly, I think these scripts should just fail for them, and it would force them to correct their underlying issue. If you continue masking these problems for their store, these issues can get worse over time. Moving forward, I personally will not be using these functions in my code. They lead to bad practices over time, and it really just doesn't feel right. In the same manner as suppressing PHP errors, I believe MySQL should just fail out, and you would force the customer to resolve their root underlying issue. I hope you liked this video. Remember to like and subscribe, and you'll get notified when I post new content like this. Stay strong and keep coding.